Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We are also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
On this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are recapping the last week of the regular season, and we are going to preview the Super Wildcard weekend. But first, we got a little bit of league news here. Jeff, what do we have?
So, just released is the London hosts for 2025. The first one is not shocking, and it's the Jaguars, who I believe have a pact to do this for years to come. And also joining them are the Jets and the Browns, which isn't really surprising because the AFC does have the extra home game in 2025. So I expect any of the other international games to have AFC teams hosting as well. Are you excited, Alex, for what is 8:30 your time, 9:30 my time games?
Not really, especially not with these teams. It's probably not going to be fun games. It's just another thing to check first thing in the morning instead of sleeping in on the weekend. So I'm not really a fan of the bright and early morning games.
Well, you should already be up considering that you are a father to a infant/toddler. I guess it's in the transition phase right now.
That's true. She doesn't let us sleep in on the weekends, so that is true.
Exactly. But I enjoy them because I make sausage biscuits and gravy for those kind of mornings, so it's kind of like an event here. But yeah, I don't think you'll see the Texans and Jaguars because I do believe that they stick non-divisional matchups in these slots here because you don't want the Jaguars to give up a home divisional game. So kind of limits the opponents that they would have.
What does someone in the Northeast know about sausage and gravy? Sausage, biscuits, and gravy. What do you even know about that?
Hey, I make a killer one. That's all I know.
You're not from the South?
I am not. I am from the North, and it is very snowy and cold out right now, but we are surviving.
Just stick to your canned brown bread or whatever it is you guys eat up there.
We don't eat canned brown bread, but it sounds good.
I think that's a Maine and Massachusetts kind of thing.
We are not part of New England, sir. Do not group us with that and those Patriots up there.
Are you not? Does New York not count as a New England area?
Negative. All right. So, Alex, week 18 was a mess.
Not for me.
Well, you ended up winning the season-long pick battle, but it was a mess overall in the scheme that there was a lot of starters not playing, and we didn't know about that till the last minute. And there was a lot of teams that weren't trying when they lost their motivation. But overall, you have won the pick battle 180 to 177. So congratulations. You beat me in the last week by 3, and you beat me in the season total by 3. So rough week by me. I got only half the games correct. But yeah. So let's start with one that I did get correct here, and it's the Browns at the Ravens. The Ravens did win this matchup as we predicted. It was a 35-10 victory for them. Henry and Lamar went crazy and clinched the division title for the Ravens. But in this particular matchup, Zay Flowers was injured, and we do know for a fact now that he will miss the very first playoff game, which that receiving core is not intimidating at all without him. So I think it will change how the Steelers play defense against the Ravens. And also in this matchup was Bailey Zappe's first Brown start ever. It did not go well. As you can tell by the score, 35-10. So the Browns will need to find quarterback competition this offseason. And that was fueled by the fact that Deshaun Watson had a second Achilles surgery, putting his 2025 season in jeopardy. He could be back, and he probably will be back. But I think this fuels their need to go find some quarterback competition, some legitimate quarterback competition for Watson going into 2025. Alex, what do you believe the Browns do at quarterback in 2025?
Well, right now, I know for a fact they're keeping their coach, Kevin Stefanski, so far, and their GM, Barry. So they're obviously going to target a quarterback in the draft with the top 2 pick. It's pretty much expect both Tennessee and Cleveland to take quarterbacks, which leaves everyone else out of luck because I think there's only 2 quarterbacks worth a first round pick, and they're not a guarantee at all. So they're in a rebuilding year. I don't think that they can do anything with Deshaun Watson's contract until 2026. All they can do is either try to keep the team together or start a rebuild now and then get another high pick for next year when they inevitably release Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and they may not be able to ever release Deshaun Watson if they keep kicking the can down the street here, and hopefully this works out well. I know overall you're not a big Deshaun Watson fan, but you have to be a fan of how the trade worked out for the Houston Texans watching this dumpster fire. And also as a Carolina fan who would have been okay with Deshaun Watson coming to us during that whole mess. I don't know if you remember, but New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, the whole NFC South basically was in on Deshaun Watson, and he ended up in Cleveland. Just as happy. I would have been happier if he ended up with a division foe, but I was definitely worried in the moment with him potentially having something left in the tank back then.
Yeah, he was pretty close to being a Falcon, from what I remember.
Yeah, and the Browns just gave him the whole world.
Yep. Goes to show you, it's not all about getting them to the opposite conference. It's about the best offer. And I can't believe that Cleveland gave up that much. At the time, I almost felt like it wasn't enough. But looking back, I'm like, I can't believe they got that much. And the more of these contracts that fall apart, the more I'm wondering if teams are going to be hesitant paying mid-level quarterbacks going forward. Like, I don't know that I would pay anyone else like I'm not going to pay Geno Smith anything close to what the market is. I'm not going to pay any of these other guys anything like that. I wouldn't have paid Dak Prescott 60 million per year either. I wouldn't have paid Lawrence the money that he's gotten. I think you look at Kirk Cousins getting hurt, you look at Aaron Rodgers' contract, Watson's contract, Russell Wilson's contract, just can't do it anymore.
So what do you do with Brock Purdy then there, buddy?
Well, Brock Purdy's better than all of them. So, I mean, you got to give him like 75 million per year. No, I think Brock Purdy, if you can do like 40 million, 45 million, you do it. He already knows the system. You know what you have in him. I think it's fine, but I wouldn't pay him 50 or 60 million. That's when I would say no.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that, and did seem like in a press conference that the GM and coach want to keep Brock Purdy around, so we'll see what happens there. But the Ravens, with this victory here, wrapped up the AFC North and kind of rendered the Steelers and the Bengals a little bit moot. But there was some seeding things going on with the Steelers that they needed to win this game to kind of block the Chargers. But in the next matchup, which these two Saturday matchups were the AFC North kind of battling it out, the Bengals did defeat the Steelers 19-17. But I do believe it was a rough game by both teams in this matchup. So it wasn't one team that was doing better than the other. They both had very rough matchups here, I believe. But this is an AFC North battle, basically. They all kind of look like this in the end, which kind of has me interested in the Steelers-Ravens next week. Spoiler alert. But the Bengals stay alive to the last day. And as I mentioned, the Steelers did fail at claiming the 5th seed here. More news that was coming out of this here. A couple things. Joe Burrow wants T. Higgins back, and he made that very clear in his last press conference. So we'll see if the Bengals oblige and keep Chase and Higgins for him, because he said that you don't win necessarily by letting good players walk out the building. But speaking of good players, their 3rd-round pick from last year, Jermaine Burton. I don't know why I almost said Trey Burton. Was he a tight end for the Eagles, I believe? It came too easy, so it feels like he's a former player, I believe, probably
Isn't
for the
that the
Eagles.
wide receiver for the Titans?
That's Treylon Burks.
Yeah, Burks. But
Trey Burton is a former tight end, and he was with the Eagles. I think he did the Phillies special. Yeah, he did the Philly special in the Super Bowl that they beat the Patriots. So that was a little bit of a callback, but Jermaine Burton's time with the Bengals here could be coming to an end. It could be very short-lived. It could be one season. He was asked not to come on the flight, so he was inactive for this matchup. Apparently, he's in a little bit of legal trouble. He had a 911 call where it did not go great for him. So we'll see what the end result of this is. And I hope that he gets the help that he needs to be a successful human being first, and then a successful NFL player second.
he is a very talented player, so I hope he gets everything figured out. He still has potential to be very big in this league if he can. As far as the Bengals roster and what they do from here, they also have Hendrickson, their elite pass rusher, who's also slated to be a free agent. So they have to make a decision on him as well. So they have to figure out a contract extension for Jamar Chase, which is the most important player besides Burrow. To me, Higgins is a luxury that they can move on from if they have to. And Hendrickson, they probably should resign, but they're probably going to franchise tag and then trade away. This is a good year for pass rushers, so you could potentially replace him with 2 or 3 guys if you had a mind to do so. They're in a tight spot because they have to make tough decisions. They're a very top-heavy team to begin with, so they don't have a lot of depth, which is why they don't have more wins. I don't think it's a good idea to re-sign T. Higgins, but they're going to at this point. And they're going to overpay because they waited 2 years too late.
Yeah, that's not on the GM, though. That's on the GM, not on the player. So
yeah,
we need to be very clear. The GM and ownership, because I assume ownership could have been like, all right, we need to pay him.
Yeah. But the owner said, we don't want to pay him. We don't want to do it or something.
But after the year that Chase has had, they're going to have to pay Chase like more than Jefferson. So he's going to have to be the top wide receiver and paid in the league. So by not paying him last year, they're going to end up paying millions extra this upcoming year, a year for Chase. Like, I don't even know how you put a price tag on Chase because he was so far above and beyond any receiver this year. Like, I don't even know how you enter that negotiation.
You just keep franchising.
Right? I can't see him playing on that, especially him.
I'm not running their negotiations, but we can move on to the next. For whatever reason, they kept their head coach, even though he didn't make the playoffs, and he continues to struggle at the beginning of the year after year. They still kept Taylor the coach.
Hey, I did throw out there to keep Taylor and hire Robert Saleh to correct the defense, and that might be a heck of a team.
Yeah, they fired their defensive coordinator, and we'll see who they hire to replace him. It would be disappointing if they just rehashed somebody who also got fired. Other than Saleh, because, head coach is different than getting fired as a defensive coordinator.
We will see. But we can hop over to the Sunday games here. And in the first matchup, the Patriots pull an upset and beat the Bills 23-16. The Bills did pull Josh Allen after the very first play so he could keep his Iron Man streak alive. I agree with it always in this situation that if the streak is intact, like, you shouldn't lose the streak because you're benching a guy for rest due to the playoffs. So I think that the Bills handled this the correct way to keep his streak alive. But that's pretty impressive for a run-first quarterback. I think he's at 116 consecutive starts now. So it's impressive for considering how he plays football. But the Patriots' victory knocked them out of the 1 pick. And then to make it even more hilarious, Gerard Mayo was fired right after the game. So now they are in the coaching market. And Alex, who do you believe is the favorite to land the Patriots job?
I just want to address the Josh Allen thing. They put him in, but all he did was hand the ball off. He didn't record a single pass. And the Bills lost because they eventually rested Trubisky himself and put Mike White in, who played terrible and is probably the main reason they lost to New England. I think because I think the backups could have still beaten New England. But to address the New England Patriots side, Drake May had 1 incompletion, and Mayo took him out and put Milton in. And Milton, granted, looks surprisingly good, not having played most of the season. So maybe there'll be some trade bait there for another team. But Mayo was woefully unprepared to be a head coach. I don't like how he got started as a head coach, throwing shade at Bill Belichick and then chastising his own owner at the very first press conference, which was kind of ridiculous. I think that Vrabel wants to be New England's head coach. That's his dream job, especially according to the Athletic article that Vrabel probably paid for. It says New England's his dream job. I can't imagine him going anywhere else. They already have a quarterback. He's used to working with that front office. He has the resume. He has the feels because he played there. He's the perfect fit, and he's what Kraft. I think that's the direction he goes. I do think Chicago is a backup location for him because I think they are looking at him and people are pushing for him. And I also think that Jacksonville could be a good spot for him. But if it's not New England, I would be 100% shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather go to a warm climate because I watch Mike McDaniel from the Dolphins in the cold climate, and I'm like, nope, I would rather go coach in Miami most of the time.
Well, my thing is, I'd rather go where there's no taxes because
That
Bill
too.
Belichick said he had a hard time recruiting free agents because of Taxachusetts, is what he called it. So, I mean, I get it. You only get people who are willing to not get paid to win a championship with Bill and Tom.
Yep, and Rob. I
hmm
think I think Bill, Rob, and Tom are all paid though, so I'm not boo-hooing over their taxes there. So
All live in different places now.
Yep. All right. So we both picked Buffalo. We both got that wrong. I didn't say that we both picked Cincinnati, and we both got that right in the previous matchup. So we are both 2-1 going into the Panthers at the Falcons. The Panthers win an OT shootout 44-38. I did not see 72 points in this matchup going into it. But
No.
Alex, I think you'll agree with me on this. I know you told me to hold my horses on this a little bit, but Bryce Young has some serious momentum going into 2025. The back half of the year has shown how much he was able to grow from adversity, and not everyone would grow under the adversity that Bryce Young grew from. So I just think that speaks to his character and the level of NFL player that he could potentially be. So I just hope he really carries what he learns this back half of the year into 2025. I think if he does, I think the Panthers are a playoff contender in 2025, especially if they could get a few free agents to come there and have a really solid draft. Because I mean, I expect Thielen to be back in some way. And then you have Coker coming on. You have Leggett that's just dipping his toe in. You have Jatavian Sanders. You have Hubbard. Brooks probably will join them back half of the year. It's a team that, and then the 2 guards that Canales brought in or had brought in, that it worked for who Bryce Young is. So it all kind of came together for Canales and Young towards down the stretch to the point where now they have the 8th pick in the draft plus momentum. So they're in a really good spot for 2025 as long as Bryce Young takes another step forward next year. And I believe that he can based on what I saw. And it was all before Thanksgiving. I know you remember me saying that early on that for Levis and Young, I needed to see something by Thanksgiving or that was it for them. And Young showed me something, Levis didn't. So it's and you could see the Titans, who we'll get to in a little bit, ended up with the number 1 overall pick. And they're probably going to go in another quarterback direction. So it's always by Thanksgiving in the second year. They have to show me something. And that happened here. Penix played well. I know he's very young, but putting up 38 points is no joke. But the real star of this game was Bijan Robinson. He had an absolutely huge game. I hope they've learned a lot from this year. I think Raheem Morris shouldn't be the coach of the Falcons anymore. He was the favorite going into the year, and they didn't even make the playoffs due to this loss. So they should be looking in a new direction at head coach. I don't know how you bungle first-round pick Bijan, first-round pick Michael Penix, first-round pick Drake London, first-round pick Kyle Pitts. I don't know how you bungle that into not making the playoffs, but
Wouldn't that mean that you should also have your general manager on the hot seat too? And they're the
yeah,
ones that paid Kirk Cousins all that guaranteed money too.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. And obviously, that puts into question should have they hired Bill Belichick last year because the GM really didn't want him, because no GM really wants Bill Belichick around, if
Well,
we're being
Ro-
honest here.
Robert Kraft is the one that sabotaged that with the Falcons owner, because the Falcons owner was going to make it happen regardless.
Yeah, and then GMs are very worried when it comes to Bill Belichick or any experienced coach, because any experienced coach is going to want final say on a roster, and the GMs typically aren't willing to give up.
Andy Reid doesn't care,
He has final say on the roster, though.
but he doesn't care.
What do you mean?
He trusts Veach to actually make good decisions. He doesn't put his foot down and he doesn't press for players.
But do you know the conversations that they have, though? And how much weight that he actually has?
He lost a lot of weight, actually.
But you would admit Reed's a little bit different in regards to the fact that he would allow Travis Kelce to yell at him on the sidelines during the Super Bowl and then run it back with him again. Like, he's built different. Like, he doesn't have the ego where he always needs to be right all the time.
Yeah,
So,
I would
and
agree.
I think that's for the betterment of the team, to be honest.
I didn't think Raheem Morris was a good coach to begin with. You look at Los Angeles's defense without him, and they look just as good, if not better, without him there. I mean, they had 2 rookies, and both of them finished in the top for QB pressures, the top 5 for QB pressures this year. I think he's
Absolutely.
overrated. I think Morris is overrated, and I think that they'll regret that selection.
Yeah. So we are now 2-2 heading to the 5th game here. The Bears at the Packers. The Bears finally beat Green Bay 24-22 on a last-second field goal. And there was confirmation after the game here that Christian Watson tore his ACL. Probably will be out till mid-2025 now. So that's a real loss. Jordan Love was also injured, but there's not concern over him missing their very first playoff game here. But this kind of bumped the Packers down to the 7th seed here by losing here, and therefore have to travel to Philly. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have about this game, but we both picked Green Bay. We both lost, and we therefore are now 2-3.
No, what's interesting about this game, it's Chicago did worse without Justin Fields. They did worse with Caleb Williams than they did with Justin Fields. It wasn't that the argument that you don't think that you can get past the hump with Justin Fields, then you take Caleb Williams. Well, they regressed year 1 with Caleb Williams. So that will be curious to track as those guys' careers continue. I expect Fields to be on a different team than the Steelers next year, would be my guess. And so he might start somewhere. Like, he could end up with the Raiders, or he could end up with Indianapolis, potentially. I mean, crazier things can happen. We'll see.
Absolutely. Anything else to add to this matchup here?
I think Green Bay risked itself in a game that didn't really matter that much to them, and having all the injuries that they have is going to bite them in the butt against and also hurt a Philly team.
Yeah, I think their goal, though, is to win this matchup, and if they would have won, they would have been the 6th seed, and they wouldn't have had to go to Philly week 1. So they would have had to go to Tampa?
Well, all they had to do was to block Chicago's field goal and make Chicago lose 3 different games to an end of the game blocked field goal and like set a
Yeah, Green
record
Bay
or
doesn't
something.
have that KC magic.
All right, that's all I have on that.
All right. So we can hop to the very next matchup, which is your team. We both picked Green Bay, I should mention, and we both lost. So, I mean, this is a very big theme here of 2 and 3. Now, here we get into the nitty gritty of the Texans at the Titans. Stroud looked good in his short stint. The Texans do end up winning 14. Pierce looked good in this matchup with busting a few long runs as well, which vindicates Alex over there. And Deontay got his very first look in the Houston offense, so I think that was really important, and that's why you do play the starters that match up, because you want to get some level of comfort with Stroud and Deontay in a game atmosphere. But the Titans here end up with the number 2 pick, but they do fire their GM after the game, but they retain their head coach. So it'll be interesting as far as that goes. Alex, what do you make of the Texans' first couple of drives, and then also their JV team getting a little bit of effort?
Well, first, I don't know if you've ever watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I want to say for Damian Pierce, vindication. So I feel good about that. I don't know if you get the reference, but I don't care. I love that Damian Pierce had a phenomenal game, and I think they'll start using him more. I know in the past they've used Dare Umbagawale or whatever as a pass blocker, but I am glad that the Texans came out of this unscathed. They didn't get any more significant injuries. They got to feel better uh, and be successful and get the bad taste out of their mouth of the last several games before that. So maybe they'll go into this Chargers game a different team. We'll see. But I am glad that they're getting Pierce involved and they're getting Deontay Johnson involved. Mechie should be a full go for this next week. Dalton Schultz should be full go. Nico Collins, we'll see. I don't really want Robert Woods to be involved anymore. I feel like he fumbles every single week. So I want him to be relegated. But I never thought Tennessee had a legitimate chance to really win this game because they had nothing to play for. And so I picked the Texans and I was right. You picked the Titans on this one for the upset, but that didn't work out for you this week.
No, and if it hadn't been for that first drive, this game would have been a little bit closer. But the Titans rotated quarterbacks in this matchup as well, so that never worked.
I felt like Will Levis was better than Mason Rudolph too.
Yeah, there was still one, like, he chucked up in the air and his guy just came down with it. Like, I don't know. It was a really weird touchdown pass. I don't know if you saw it. You probably
Yeah.
did because you probably watched the
Will,
whole game. But it felt
Will
like no one
Levis
was defending that pass.
Will Levis is very toolsy, but he's not a good decision maker. That's the big problem for him.
Yeah, and he's not going to be the starter in 2025.
No,
So
no way.
I think he'll be the backup, though. I don't think you move on from him when he's cheap and young.
I agree. That's why the Raiders are going to keep Aiden O'Connell. But we can talk about a different team that's probably going to move on or change starters next year. We can move on to the Jaguars at the Colts. I picked the Colts to win. You picked the Jaguars to win. Mr. Anthony Richardson did not play, but the Colts won a very close overtime, 26-23 over the Jaguars. Very interesting that it was that close, Jeff. Could have really swung either way, but the Colts have come out now saying that they're going to bring in competition for Anthony Richardson. I think that the Colts general manager Ballard kept his job by saying he made a mistake with Richardson and that they're going to move forward. So I think you look at the numbers of like the top wide receivers for the Colts with Joe Flacco, and if you get a younger guy that can also get the ball downfield. These guys are going to explode. Downs, Pittman, Pierce. I would like to see Aiden Mitchell involved more too. So if you get a younger guy that can push the ball down the field, these guys are going to explode. And Richardson, at this point, I don't see him working out. He has to have some kind of radical change in his mentality. But he just seems now soft, injury prone. He doesn't seem like he wants to play. He doesn't seem like he's got any kind of fire in him. He just seems complacent to be mediocre. And I hate that because he has all the physical abilities to succeed. He's just not there mentally.
No, I completely agree with that. And I had been saying that all along, that I didn't believe that he had it to succeed. And I hate being right, but I am right here. Also, I don't even know what to do with Brian Thomas and Josh Downs for 2025 because I feel like they're going to be so overdrafted.
I don't know if Josh Downs will. I feel like his success has been more quiet. It's not as in your face with Brian Thomas. Um I probably won't have Brian Thomas in redraft leagues because I won't be drafting him as high as he's likely going to go. I'm very curious though because I happen to have both of them in a redraft league. Brian Thomas or Drake London. They both finished right next to each other this year.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't know if I could take Brian Thomas Jr. in like the second or third round next year. And he might go as high as round 1 considering where he finished this year. I think he was wide receiver 5 or 4 this year. So I love him. Don't get me wrong. I have him in 3 dynasty leagues. I am more than happy to have him. But he finished wide receiver 4. So to ask him to finish wide receiver 4 again next year is mind-blowing. Like, I don't think he can do it 2 years in a row. Do I think he could be a top 12 wide receiver? Yes, but that puts him closer to round 4 than it does round 1. So,
especially when Christian Kirk comes back, he's going to be relegated back to the backup spot. No.
There's 2 wide receiver spots, and Gabe Davis is not going to be one of those. But they did try to trade Christian Kirk at the deadline, so I wonder if there's a trade that comes to fruition this offseason. I don't know how you can welcome him back to the fold knowing that he was about to be traded before he broke his collarbone last year. So,
well, that in his contract, like I can understand wanting to get his contract off the books. They're gonna have to shift towards offensive line and defense this offseason. Also, we don't even know who the coach is. We don't know if they're offensive oriented. We don't know who the coordinator is. So it's hard to choose. With the Falcons, we know exactly what the situation is, and it looks like London has better numbers with Penix quarterback, and they're probably going to keep Penix. So I would lean London over Thomas in redrafts. I would definitely like Thomas in Dynasty over London, in my opinion. So
yeah, it's interesting, and we'll see where Thomas and Neighbors shake out in 2025. But I'm a little worried that at least Thomas and potentially Downs could be overdrafted because Downs actually had a pretty up year for his last name being Downs. Finished wide receiver 36, so a wide receiver 3, but the guy missed 3 weeks, so no joke there. But as you had mentioned, the Jaguars did fire head coach Doug Peterson the day after this game, which was expected. They have kept the GM for right now, and I know you have some thoughts and feelings about that because the owner isn't fully sold on keeping the GM around this year. It just seems like a more for now type of deal.
yeah, he was asked point blank by a reporter with the GM on the line if the new coach wants a different GM. Would you fire him? And he basically said yes. So, with the GM listening, like, I can't imagine saying something like that.
He was honest. What's wrong with
Well,
being honest?
I would say I like some of the things that Trent has done, like drafting Thomas. Bigsby looks better year 2. Like, I like some of the things he has done. If that changes, I would consider making a change, of course.
Yeah. But
And
in
that way
order
you
to
throw
pull one
some
of the big
credit his way.
guys,
Yeah.
In order to pull one of the big guys, you might have to change. They might have to change who has say over personnel. So, and Trent may not like that. So, there's a lot of pieces that go into effect here. But Jonathan Taylor, 177 yards. He won people championships down the stretch after that fumble.
In
If
a
you got past
meaningless
that
game.
week, if you got past that first week of his fumbling at the goal line, he scored 39.8 points, 26.6, 24.5. Without Richardson, this guy is a legit RB1, and he may be underdrafted next year, and you have to keep an eye out for that.
I'm curious why he even played in this matchup, to be honest with you. There's no playoff implications for the Colts. An older back, sort of. I would have wanted to keep him fresh. I'm surprised they didn't play their other running backs. Didn't see what they had in the other running backs, too.
Absolutely. So in that matchup, you had picked Indy and won, and I picked Jacksonville and lost. So you have a 2-pick lead on me so far, and we know that you end up with 3-pick victory over me. So anything else to add to the Jaguars or the Colts before we move on to the Saints at the Buccaneers?
I'm just happy these teams are in the Texans division.
Absolutely. You love that turnstile at quarterback and coach continuing. But in the Saints at Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield did play his heart out, and the Buccaneers do win and make the playoffs with a 27-19 victory. And it was really cool at the end of the game where Baker realized he messed up getting Evans 5 yards to continue his 1,000-yard streak, and they threw it on first down instead of kneeling it to get him 7 yards, to get him 1,002 yards on the season. And it was really cool to watch Mike Evans continue his streak on the last play of the game because the clock ran out right after that.
If I was the Saints defender, I would have told the entire team to cover Evans to block that.
Well, that's why you put Evans in the slot, because it's a lot harder to cover the slot.
Yeah.
They did that on purpose.
I would have said, ignore every other receiver and only guard Evans and block this guy from getting his $3 million.
Right?
But
they don't run Evans out of the slot very often. So the fact that I bet you the Saints didn't even have that in their possible plays.
yeah,
Right.
not much on this one, but good for the Bucks for seizing their own destiny and clinching their playoffs. They look like the best team in the NFC South by far. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this. The Saints just stink right now.
I think Rattler looked okay in this matchup. Not good, not bad, but okay.
Yeah, a lot of that's because Tampa doesn't really have a good pass rush. They have a decent secondary, but bad pass rush.
Absolutely, and I'm really impressed with Baker Mayfield this first year without Canales really putting down some tape. So this is now his second offensive coordinator that he was able to put down a good season with. And I think the dude's off to the races now. So he's a guy that I'm not even worried about for the next 7 to 8 years being a starter in the NFL. Crazy.
I think Tampa suits him. I think everything about the team suits him very well.
The attitude, yeah. Because
I think Mike Evans. Mike Evans is the perfect receiver for him.
Yeah,
perfect.
But McMillan's becoming that too. But anyways, I think Tampa still plays with a chip on their shoulder. The Tom Brady era was so small and so short that I still think that they play with this chip on their shoulder, that they're this underdog, this mighty underdog, and Baker kind of fits that mold. I think Brady was just like a small blip on their radar, and he did win them a Super Bowl. But yeah, we can hop over to the Giants at the Eagles next here. And the only note I have in this matchup is the Eagles win 20-13. Eagles didn't play any starters. Giants looked pretty terrible, and they end up with the 3-pick in the draft. You picked the Eagles, I picked the Giants. So that's your 3-pick lead right now.
Yeah, I almost swept our differences. I think you got one to keep it from a sweep.
Yeah. What did you have any takeaways from this matchup, or
I thought Tanner McKee did a really good job, and I think he should be the permanent backup behind Hurts over what's his face?
Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett.
He's your boy.
I think McKee is a better quarterback. I've never liked Kenny Pickett as a quarterback. You can never put that burden on me, Ricky Bobby. Like, can't put that evil on me. Never been a fan of Kenny Pickett.
All right. So Dable did keep his job, though. I know that was a little bit of a surprise to you, but I think it was the right call. I think having a turnstile at GM, coach, and quarterback, I think the GM keeping the job is the more surprising one here. But I think a turnstile at one or two of those positions is detrimental to the franchise. I don't think the franchise could ever get any momentum going forwards. That's why you always root for. That's why the Bills are so happy for a couple reasons. The Bills are happy because the Dolphins pay Tua, and Tua can never beat the Bills in that division. There's no possible way for him to pass the Bills in that division, quarterback wise.
Especially not in Buffalo. He can't play in
Yeah.
the cold. It's proven time and time again.
And the funny thing is the whole back half of the season is colder weather, so they're kind of set up for failure. They're also laughing at the Jets because they've had like a kind of a turnstile at GM, at quarterback, at coach. So they're and the Patriots are going down that path too. So the Bills have like a path now to be dominant in this division for years to come because of that turnstile. And kudos to the Giants owner for keeping at least the coach and letting him go get his quarterback because he's never had the opportunity to do that. And if you fire him without giving him a true opportunity to lead the job, then are you really doing your due diligence? Oh, right.
Yeah, the last thing you want is for him to go to a rival team and look really good. I do want to add one more thing. I know offline you talked about the Eagles struggling at the wide receiver position with A.J. Brown and Smith both having their injury ailments. Well, we totally forgot because it's been super quiet, but we totally forgot they traded for Jahan Dotson before the deadline. And he had a heck of a game. He had 11 targets, caught 7 of them for 94 yards. He could help fill in on offense. He's someone that people like.
Has Hurts ever played or practiced with him? Because Hurts has been Hurts for the last month.
Well, if they can just have Tanner McKee lead them to success over the Green Bay Packers.
There you go.
I think that could work. I'd be totally cool with that.
There you go. All right. Hopping over to the other NFC East matchup, it's the Commanders at the Cowboys. And Jaden Daniels was benched early for health reasons. Just try to keep him healthy for the postseason. But Washington does end up pulling out the win 23-19 on a last-second touchdown from Marcus Mariota to Terry McLaurin. And Trey Lance, I will admit, Trey Lance did look pretty decent here in his only start this season.
Yeah, he was okay. But I am surprised they didn't give Cooper Rush a series or two. And a lot of people are upset that the Cowboys cost Cooper Rush $250,000 by not playing him at all in this matchup. But Jerry has to save that money for Parsons and the head coach and the franchise.
You know that's not fully true, though, because they should have been paying Lance all along, just kind of for him to lay out tape. So he shouldn't have even had the amount of starts that he had to this point, in my opinion.
That's true. Jalen Tolbert looks good. I think he's definitely the number 2 next year. I really thought at the beginning of this that the Cowboys were going to end up winning because they looked like they were dominating Washington until the fourth quarter. So I am glad that we were proven right, that the overall talent ended up coming in and making the crucial, decisive nature between the two teams and got Washington the win. But I don't really have much to say about either of these teams right now.
Me either. Yeah, the Commanders are moving on, but they also get the 6th seed because of this victory. So they don't have to go to Philadelphia week 1. All right, Chiefs at the Broncos. We had the JV squad for the Chiefs lose 38-0 to the Denver Broncos. Wentz does look terrible in a spot start, so I will fully jump off of the Wentz wagon going forward. And Bo Nix has a great game entering the playoffs, but Denver still does lack a viable run game, and I think that's going to be the one thing that really hurts them going into Buffalo next week. And I know people are talking about how Denver could potentially upset Buffalo. Rookie quarterbacks don't typically do good in their first start in the postseason, so that's one strike. Strike two is not having a viable ground game in the Buffalo cold. And that is going to be a huge problem for Denver. So as long as Buffalo plays good defense against the pass game, this game should be relatively easy for Buffalo. And that's a spoiler alert going into a little bit later. But we both picked Denver. We both got it right here. Anything I missed on this matchup?
No, I think you covered most of it. I'm not sure if Kansas City even got a first down. I mean, that might be a little hyperbolic, but they don't have very many offensive plays. Oh my. All right.
Some of me wonders if that was by design, though. Just the fact to keep them healthy,
Or maybe keep the Bengals out.
that too. But
I know Kelsey said, "Oh, we ain't scared of nobody." I'm like, okay, well, you guys clearly your coaches were, so
that's fair. That's fair. But I wonder if it was for health reasons, because if you think about it, if you're not being successful on offense, none of your offensive backups could get hurt. And then on defense, if you play so crappy, you give up 38 points. Like, you can't get hurt either if you're not giving maximum effort. So I wonder if they did prioritize health in this matchup, just looking at it. Because you would think Carson Wentz would want to put good tape down, regardless if the goal was to lock the Bengals out. So
I don't think the lack of success was them intentionally tanking or anything like that. I think they just put the third stringers in, the combination of second and third stringers, and I think the lack of success is they just weren't as talented to go against the Denver defense. And his best wide receiver he had to work with was Juju Smith-Schuster. So I don't think it was necessarily Carson Wentz's fault. I think Carson Wentz did a reasonably okay job. If he played with the full starters, I think he would have looked much better.
yeah, and he's previously looked better when he had any work with the Chiefs. So we will see. But the other AFC West matchup was the Chargers at the Raiders. We both picked the Chargers. We both got it right. The Chargers did win 34-20. This does lock up the number 5 seed for the Chargers, which they overperformed your expectations this year. And Herbert had a killer day with 346 passing yards. Johnston went 13 catches on 14 targets, had one of the best receiver days of the season out of any receiver. And we know that that's a ceiling, but we also know what his floor looks like, which you'll tell us about in a minute here. The Raiders waited a couple days, but they did fire Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco a couple days after Antonio Pierce. So they look like they are going in full rebuild. There are reports out there that Tom Brady is leading the search for GM and coach, which is interesting because Mark Davis has not had any success finding coaches in recent memory or GM. So it may not be a bad idea to turn over the reins to a 7-time Super Bowl winning quarterback. But the Raiders have Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers to build around in 2025. So they have weapons for whatever quarterback is leading the charge. And they have the 4 pick, right?
Yeah, they're not
They
in the
have
top
the 6.
3.
They have the 6 pick.
Yeah, they're not getting a quarterback in the draft.
Nope. So they're going to have to go out there and find a Flacco, trade for Deshaun Watson, which I know you've thrown out that out there before. They're going to have to do something.
I think it's going to have to be like a Justin Fields type or a Kirk Cousins type or somebody who's a free agent.
Agreed. Yeah. I still think in the back of my mind that Kirk Cousins ends up with San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan finally.
I don't think so. I would rather pay Brock Purdy $70 million per year than pay Kirk Cousins to start.
Well, you would bring him in the premise that he's the backup. If Purdy doesn't lay tape, then he could be the starter. Put incentives in his contract.
He's already pushing 40 though. So anyway, like you said, Quentin Johnson had himself a day. It's almost like Dameon Pierce. They kind of lined up well on the same day. What?
Alex, we need to talk about something.
What's that?
Age 36 is not pushing 40.
I thought he was like 38, about to be 39.
No.
He plays so much older than his age, dude. Like,
I mean,
my gosh.
We have this discussion after every year, but we're 15 months removed from him having an incredible start to the 2023 season. Yep. So I think he just needs a little bit more time to recover that Achilles, and he needs to go find a place with a better wide receiver core. Now,
He
I know
needs to
Drake
rebuild
London's
his
good.
confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. And who better to do that than his buddy Kyle Shanahan in warm San Francisco? All right. Anything else to add to this? We both got it right.
I will say that the Raiders actually fought them pretty well and until they inevitably lost. But Quentin Johnston had himself a good game. I'll give him that. Lad McConkey is always hyper productive. And Jacoby Myers had a nice finish to his year. And Brock Bowers, I think, passed all rookie tight end records or something this year. So, a very interesting final matchup.
All right. So now we move on to the Dolphins at the Jets. So the Dolphins were still playing for a playoff spot here. They did not know the Broncos had won at this point, but the Jets do win 32-20 as Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams turn back the clock. And it does lead to some speculation that if Adams and Rodgers don't return to the Jets next year, that they could pair up somewhere else and play. And I think you would admit, I know you don't love Aaron Rodgers overall, but the most fun to watch Rodgers is when he's playing with Davante Adams. So there is that. And the Jets will be looking at coach and a GM here in the next couple of days. I know they interviewed Rex Ryan, so there's a potential there for a reunion with Rex Ryan. But switching over to the Dolphins side, the Dolphins do keep their head coach and GM for 2025. Laid that out, which I believe is correct. I'm not sure Tua's the guy now, though, and I'm not sure if they're having internal questions or conversations about that. But I think that they really have to be honest with themselves going forward, especially if Mike McDaniel wants to keep this job long term. And Tyreek Hill appears to want out of Miami. He appears to quit mid-game. And there's a report that came out that he played with a broken wrist this year. And he toughed it out for the team, but he also quit on the team. So two interesting reports that have come out this week. And Devon Achane should be a top 18 pick into the NFL draft. So he should go in the first round and a half in drafts next year. I don't know if I'll take him. I don't know if I fully trust his health, but that would be the only reason I wouldn't take him going into that year. But you picked Miami. I picked the Jets. I did pick up a pick. One on you here, so you have two lead on me so far here.
Yeah, this is the one that you got that prevented the sweep of our differences. So kudos to you. The Miami Dolphins crumbled in their only attempts to try to stay relevant and in the playoffs, and the Jets with nothing to play for beat the crap out of them this game. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers has done enough to stay with the Jets. I don't know where he would go. I feel like half the current quarterbacks in the league were San Francisco 49er fans at some point. So he could go to the Niners himself, maybe. I don't know what else to talk about with this one, but I'm very curious your thoughts, Devon Achane and Breece Hall going into the 2025 fantasy draft. Are you going to take either of them in the first two rounds at this point? Yeah.
Hall's probably a second rounder for me at this point. Can't drop him too much based on a year that didn't look great for the team. So there is that, and Garrett Wilson wants out, I think, of the Jets at some point too. So we got to keep an eye on that. What if Garrett Wilson goes to the Bengals to replace T. Higgins? I don't, just spitballing it out there. Like, you never know.
Would take him in the first round in a heartbeat.
Exactly. And Chase.
Yeah. I still believe in Garrett Wilson. I think it's just the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and the poor offensive coordinators that they have. That's the reason why he didn't do as well as we wanted this year, but he still finished pretty good. Like, I don't think he finished that bad. He just didn't get as many yards as we were looking for.
Yeah, what if a team like the Packers traded for Garrett Wilson?
I would want the Texans to trade for him, honestly.
Yeah, that's a player, though, that I think is a Pro Bowler, and I think that you would stick to trying to chuck him to the NFC if you could. What if
Best offer.
What if Jaden Daniels ended up with him in Washington?
All
that
I
wouldn't
know,
be fair.
no. All I know is that the Texans need offensive line more than anything else, and they need a guard, and it's not worth drafting a guard in the first round. So I would switch a first for a second and Garrett Wilson and maybe throw in like a couple thirds or something so that the Jets can have a second first round pick. I don't know. I would do it. I would rather have Garrett Wilson than an aging, coming off an injury, Stephon Diggs.
We will see. The Texans could end up with Diggs again though next year, so we'll see if they re-sign him. I feel like he feels like he has unfinished business there, and I feel like that might be a good thing for the Texans.
I still think there's a chance he ends up with his brother in Dallas.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe his brother doesn't even want to be in Dallas anymore, though. So
Maybe his brother wants to come to the Houston Texans.
there you go.
I
Anything's
would love to
possible.
sign. I would love to sign Parsons too.
Yep. Hey, you're just gonna start writing checks, aren't you?
They have the cap space at the moment. You know, they don't have to pay Stroud yet.
Exactly. But Stroud does need to rebound next year in a big way, and we'll see if he can. Well, and we'll see if it's with Bobby Slowick or not. So we got a lot of questions on the Texans side, but I know we're not even talking about the Texans right now.
Yeah, we'll bring that up for the playoff matchup.
Yeah. So we have the next matchup here is the Seahawks at the Rams. Rams did not play any starters, but Geno has a huge 4-touchdown game. Gets his incentives for this matchup as well. But the Seahawks do win 30-25. So they beat the backups only by 5 points. So that's not it's not really a good thing. Also not a good thing. Blake Corum breaks his arm and is out for the postseason. And I think that is a pretty big injury because I think he was the number 2 to Kyron Williams. But now it's Ronnie Rivers time behind him. And we know Ronnie Rivers can perform when he's in there. So they're not going to lose too much for it, but you got to feel for the kid that was in his first year, going to his first playoffs.
I just think it could have been Kyron Williams if they played him. It could have been Kyron Williams instead of Blake Corum. So, I mean, at least it was the backup, not the starter. I hate it for Blake Corum, but didn't really expect him to come that much into play year one anyway. And that's a pretty minor injury when it comes to a running back compared to other injury types.
Gotcha.
But that's a team I think should have signed Ezekiel Elliott. The wrong LA team signed Zeke, in my opinion.
No, that's the perfect Gus Edwards guy. But yeah.
See, I feel like Zeke is the exact same player Kyron is at this point in their career. Old Zeke is like a young Kyron Williams.
Yeah.
That's basically what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Anything else to add to this matchup? We both picked Seattle. We both got it right. But without LA playing their starters, there's not much to say.
Yeah.
And so we can move on to the 49ers at the Cardinals. There wasn't much going on in this matchup. Nothing to play for. Murray throws for 4 touchdowns also and beats Dobbs. And the 49ers 47-24. Ricky Pearsall is one to watch in drafts in 2025. Back-to-back good games. But 49ers have a turnstile problem of their own at defensive coordinator and special teams coordinator.
Yeah. 49ers probably going to bring in Saleh, as we've discussed, I feel like a million times. I think that makes the most sense. I know that you want Saleh to go to like the Bengals or a completely different team to rehab his career again, but it makes too much sense for the 49ers. He's already familiar with the players, and I think they could help each other out.
I know, but just because it helps the 49ers does not mean it helps Saleh. So you got to remember it's got to benefit both parties here. And if he goes back and has the same success again with the same team, that doesn't really give him another feather in his cap. That gives him the same feather that he already has.
If he does better than the previous DC did just this last season, then that's a different feather.
Yeah. I just think him rehabbing a completely different defense would be a game changer for him. But there is hope of him even getting a coaching job this go around because he's interviewing with the Raiders. So there's a lot of wild cards here.
Yeah, might be more difficult for him to rehab the Bengals if they move on from Hendrickson. And
they're not moving on from Hendrickson. They're going to re-sign them all.
Well, their defense was already depleted from the previous year because they let DJ Reader go to Detroit, and they let a couple.
They've been letting good players walk out of the building for years.
Well, yeah, that's why the Bengals' defense was so much worse than the previous year. I wouldn't blame the defensive coordinator for that. If you're not giving him the talent to work with, how is he supposed to coach?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. But you picked Arizona, and I picked San Fran, and I got crushed. So
I tried to tell you, man. I tried to tell you.
I didn't see San Francisco ending up with 6 wins. Like, that didn't compute for me, but that is what happened. And then we go on to what should have been the game of the year, but I think we'll both admit that this game did not live fully up to the hype that we had both thought. The Vikings at the Lions. The Lions eventually showed up and took off, and they won the game 31-9. But the story of this game was Darnold and the Vikings had trouble punching the ball into the end zone every time they were in the red zone. And I think that, speaking of feathers and caps, I think that's a feather in the cap for Aaron Glenn. The defensive game plan that he had for Darnold and Justin Jefferson was great in this particular matchup. And the broadcast even said that he went to Dan Gamble, whatever we want to call him, and had his full support on the game plan ahead of time. So knowing it was going to be a different game plan and something that could blow up in their face, he wanted to make sure he had his full support before executing it. So, and he did, and they did execute it, and they won, and you won this matchup. You picked Detroit. I picked Minnesota. Lions will get the bye, and Minnesota will play on Monday night because of this.
I'm not 100% surprised that this is how the game went. Obviously, we would have preferred a higher scoring back and forth game. And earlier on, this was a dismal game. Goff had 2 interceptions. This definitely wasn't a good Goff game. Sam Darnold couldn't do anything. He was constantly harassed and pressured. Basically, the Lions defense did to Sam Darnold what Minnesota's defense does to everybody else, and just blitzed them and harassed the quarterback all game, and it worked out. Your old trusty friend Cam Akers had a nice 58-yard run, finished with the highest rushing total for his team, 65 rushing yards off of 6 rushes. Aaron Jones was either phased out or a little banged up in this game, and none of the receiving options for Minnesota was able to get anything really going, whereas Jahmyr Gibbs had 4 touchdowns. He had like 170 something combined yards. Both Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta had good games. Jameson Williams didn't really get involved that much in this one. Tim Patrick, the last couple weeks, hasn't really done that much. But I'm happy for the Lions. Best finish in their franchise history. First time I think they've ever finished number 1 in their conference. I surely hope that they win the Super Bowl this year, because they're going to lose both coordinators, I'm fairly certain, and probably several position coaches.
Yeah, and we'll see what Dan Campbell can do to rebuild that staff. That'll be the interesting component of all this. I do believe they lose both coordinators too out of this. I don't know where yet. I don't know where anyone goes yet, because everyone's interviewing so many candidates this time around. Like, there's no like drilled down area just yet.
Yeah, the Jets and the Bears are the ones casting the widest nets for sure.
Patriots feel like they're set on Vrabel, and that from what you said, but they did interview Ben Johnson today, and they did grant them an interview. So you just never know.
I think the Patriots are considering Johnson or Vrabel. Like, those are their top 2 guys. I don't see Johnson wanting to go to
They gave him an interview,
Patriots.
Though. He didn't even give Washington an interview last year.
That worked out, I think, for both of them, to be honest with you.
Him and Jaden Daniels would have been very nice.
Maybe, but it's hilarious to me that the Bears are now interviewing Cliff Kingsbury when they could have hired him for head coach last year.
Yeah, he's not the right guy. I don't think he's getting a job this go around. I think that's just more of a fact-finding mission.
Maybe.
He doesn't feel like a serious, viable candidate.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can talk about the wild card round, and then we can share our thoughts on where we think coaches will end up, or what we think are the best matches. We can play the dating game or whatever. One of us can choose the team, the other one chooses the coach. How about that?
All right.
All right, let's start with the wild card round. We got the first matchup, the Los Angeles Chargers at the Houston Texans. Jeff, I think that the breakdown for these teams, they're closer in skill level than people think. I do think that Stroud struggles against 2 high safeties, and Chargers have played that more than most teams this year. I think that both have good pass rushers. They both struggle on portions of their offensive line. I would just give the edge to coaching and quarterback play to the Chargers. I'd give them maybe like a 2 3 point advantage at this point. And I really think it's going to come down to, can Houston harass and shut down Justin Herbert or not? Or can Houston get Joe Mixon going, because they've struggled the last few weeks to get him going? I'm going Chargers in this one. I'd be surprised if the Texans won. If they did win, I think it would set them back further in the long run, but I wouldn't hate it, I guess. I'm going Chargers, though.
I am also going Chargers, and for the point that you had said that the coach and the quarterback, 2 of the 4 big points belong to the Chargers pretty easily. And the other 2 points would be owner and GM. And I feel like I don't feel strongly about the GMs of either of them or the owner of either of the team.
Well, I think you need to add offensive line, to me, is a major point. And right now, no one's calling protections for the Texans because Stroud doesn't know him, and he's not allowed in the system to call the protections. It's supposed to be a center, and they don't have a really good veteran center. They have a bunch of young guys who they've shifted around in multiple positions. So no one's calling these protections. So all these stunt plays on defense, these blitzes where they stunt off surprises and throws off the offensive lineman, which leads to someone coming unblocked straight at Stroud, that I don't see any fix that's happening for that. And I don't like the offensive line in general. That's the biggest weakness, and I think that's the reason the Texans pretty much lose. And that's been the reason Stroud has been so off this year. It's hard to be on when you're not that mobile of a quarterback and you're being hit in the face every single time you snap the ball.
That's true. That is true. All right. So we can move on to the 6 seed Pittsburgh Steelers at their division rival, number 3 seed Baltimore Ravens, and they both won one matchup in the regular season. Without Zay Flowers, I expect this matchup to be relatively low scoring. I expect Pittsburgh to be able to focus on Derrick Henry in this particular matchup. What's your thoughts about this this matchup here, Alex? Unless you want me to give me my pick first, which I am going to go with the Baltimore Ravens in this matchup.
I'm also going Baltimore Ravens in this matchup. I don't think Pittsburgh has enough on offense to compete with them. I know that Flowers is out this week, but I don't think Flowers was as involved as your typical number 1 wide receiver would be on another team anyway. They have Mark Andrews, they have Isaiah Likely, they're forcing Bateman down everyone's throats. They have Henry, Lamar can move around. It really depends on the weather mostly this week. If it's like 30 miles per hour winds, it's going to be hard for either team to get a passing game going, and it's going to be on the ground. And although they're somewhat similar, I trust Henry over Najee Harris in that regard. I also think Jackson obviously is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. I don't think that George Pickens is playing at a high level either, and they don't have much outside Pickens and Freiermuth for Pittsburgh. So to me, everything screams Ravens in this matchup.
Very possible, very possible. How dare you besmirch Mike Williams?
Oh yeah, I forgot he was still there. Just like I forgot Deontay Johnson was still on the Texans, and Texans have to get him going, otherwise they have no chance.
Immediately. All right. So we already know my pick in the next matchup here, the number 7 Denver Broncos at the number 2 Buffalo Bills. But Alex, who are you taking in this matchup? And break it down for us.
It's not a 0% chance that Denver can win. I just don't think that they're ready yet for the big stage. Obviously, going Buffalo. I like both quarterbacks in this matchup. It's for the first matchup that we've gotten to where I legitimately like both quarterbacks. We have the runner-up for Rookie of the Year, and we have maybe the guy who ends up taking MVP of the year, MVP this year, in the same matchup. But it's in Buffalo. It's going to be cold as per usual outside in Buffalo at this time of year. Everything's probably going to go Buffalo's way, except the Denver defense might help keep it close. I just think the Broncos need a run game. They need more wide receivers. Vele, to me, is not a good wide receiver, and he's probably Denver's number 2, although Mims is taken off of late. there's a small chance Denver upsets, but this should be Buffalo's year to potentially make it all the way to the Super Bowl.
Agreed. I'm going to go the Bills in this matchup as well. I don't think it'll be particularly close. I think this will be the coldest matchup that Bo Nix has played in a very, very long time. So this morning, waking up an hour outside of Buffalo, it felt like 6 degrees here. So I don't know how he does with that. I do find it interesting, though, that the 3 first matchups are the AFC matchups. So by 4 o'clock on Sunday, we will know the matchups for the AFC and not have any clue what's going on in the NFC at that point. So just interesting that they did it this way.
I always disrespect the AFC. It's like all the people making the decisions are NFC fans.
It gives them more rest.
I guess.
On the following week on the flip side. But we know the matchups based on our matchups here that we picked. Week 2 of the playoffs would look like the Chargers and the Chiefs, Bills and the Ravens. That would be crazy. It would be crazy 2 good games in divisional round. So we can move on to the NFC here. It's the number 7 Packers at the number 2 Eagles. That is Sunday at 4:30. Man, the Eagles are so banged up right now. I don't really know what to do in this matchup. I do think they have more talent. I think Barkley is the best running back in the league. And for that reason, I will go with the Eagles because I believe that he can take over games, and I think he's going to have to in this matchup in order for them to win.
I'm wondering if we're going to have any differences. Well, we might have one, maybe. I don't know. But I'm going Philadelphia with this one as well. Both teams have some crucial injuries. I think Philadelphia is so stacked that they'll survive almost any injury. If they lost, I think they'd immediately fire Nick Sirianni. So I'm going Eagles in this one.
Absolutely. And we can move on to the number 6 Washington Commanders at the number 3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll let you break it down.
Okay. We have the young quarterback for the Commanders, Jaden Daniels, now playing at the first NFL team he played against for the regular season and lost to. Tampa Bay gave him the brutal welcome to the NFL to start the season. Let's see if they can finish it this season. So I'm going Tampa Bay. I expect this to be probably one of the higher scoring games this week. Maybe even the game of the week. I like Baker. I like Mike Evans and McMillan and Bucky Irving over what the Commanders have right now. So I'm very curious, Jeff, who you have.
I am going to go the home team in this matchup, and for the same reasons of the Denver Broncos, I just don't think rookie quarterbacks have a very good first start in the postseason. I think they get their feet wet. I think Jaden Daniels will play a little more tight. Baker's been here before. Evans, McMillan, could be Godwin on the horizon if they make it far enough into the playoffs. But if Philly and Tampa win, no matter what, it would be a Tampa visiting Philly in week 2. So, yeah, I'm going to go Tampa.
It would be kind of silly for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to declare a Mike Evans day if they just lost week 1 of the playoffs. So I think that the pressure's on the Buccaneers to win this one.
And they will on NBC. Sunday night football.
All right, what about the Monday night football game that was moved to Arizona due to the wildfires that was supposed to be Southern California with the LA wildfires, that it has moved to the Cardinal Stadium? Jeffrey, who do you have with Minnesota Vikings at the Los Angeles Rams?
So I think this is the hardest game of the week to pick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think it's close. I think the neutral field makes it even harder to pick because now the Rams don't have home field advantage. They have the worst record between the two teams. However, on the flip side, the Rams have a much more playoff experience than the Vikings do, especially at the quarterback position. And for that reason, I'm going to go the Rams. But I think this is going to be the matchup of the week.
Wow. Oh, we're 100% the same this time. Granted, it's a lot less matchups. So I'm also going the Rams. I was always intending to go to the Rams. I thought you were going to go Vikings here. I think most people are at this point because of the change of venue. I just think the way that the the defense harasses teams for the Rams, lines up in a good way. As we've seen, they're going to copy the same thing that Detroit did, and they're going to harass Sam Darnold and make him look like the Jet Sam Darnold instead of the one he's been for most of the year. So I think the Rams are the better team. I think that the Vikings overexceeded their season. I think it's come to an end, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I wouldn't disagree, but both of these matchups, so we'd be looking at the Tampa Bay visiting Eagles in week 2, but either one of these matchups, the rematch of the Vikings in Detroit, or the Rams and Stafford visiting Detroit and Goff in week 2 is just as appealing. So I love that matchup because they were traded for each other. So that matchup always gets a rise out of me.
Very interesting. That, of course, would change if Tampa lost, I think.
Yep. Then they'll face in the NFC Championship.
Okay. Well, Jeff, we've got a lot of openings for coaching right now. What do you think is the most appealing open job right now?
I would say the Chicago Bears because I think they have defense. I think they have pass rush down, they have receivers, weapons, all that stuff down. And they had the number 1 pick last year, which obviously would make it appealing just from that standpoint. And I think that Ben Johnson probably ends up in Chicago. What about you?
I could totally see them going Mike McCarthy if he doesn't get extended with the Cowboys. I think the best thing for them is to either go Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, or Cliff Kingsbury. They need to go offensive guy. I don't like a defensive signing, but to me it's between Ben Johnson and Mike McCarthy and what they do. And I think Ben Johnson's the better decision.
Yeah, I wouldn't do Liam Cohen for any team right now for the same reason of Bobby Slowick last year. Like, he needs a second year before I would even
Yeah,
consider hiring him.
I would be surprised if a team signs Bobby Slowick, but what's the would you say the second best option is the Jaguars?
I like it for geography. I think I still prefer Drake May long term to Trevor Lawrence. So there's
Yep.
that, but they have no other pieces really on that team.
Yeah, they have a couple of defensive pieces. I
At
mean,
least
it
the
depends on
Jags
how.
have Thomas.
They have Thomas and 2 running backs,
Yep. That's a good question. That's a very fair question. Let's
and
go
it's
with
an
the
easy.
Jags as the number 2 because I don't feel
Yeah.
very strongly about it. Who do you have ending up there?
Okay, so if Ben Johnson doesn't go to the Bears, I could see him going to the Jaguars to work with Lawrence, and then it's in an easier division. I mean, Brian Thomas would be great to work with. Those running backs would be great to work with. It would kind of remind him of kind of how the Lions are set up a little bit. So that would make sense. And if that didn't work out, because pretty sure Vrabel is going to New England, who I guess would be our number 3 team that's open.
Yeah, we can agree on Vrabel there. Salah would be a good hire there. I mean, Salah, I think, has to be considered to be a quick retread.
Would you say he would be a solid hire?
Yeah, very solid.
I don't know if I trust him as a head coach, to be honest with you. He hasn't been able to get offenses going on, so I would hire an offensive coach, whatever the next best would be. Honestly, I think Cliff Kingsbury to Chicago would probably work, and Ben Johnson to Jacksonville, to be honest with you. I think I would change it
Yeah, I
up.
don't like Cliff at all because he hasn't shown a second pitch. He was figured out midway through the year. Why would you ever promote him to a head coach?
Who? Cliff?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Cliff actually finished the year pretty strong, and he usually goes off of a cliff
Yeah.
most years.
So one positive year where he played some pretty beat down teams down the stretch versus the whole history. You're throwing out that entire history for this one
Well,
year.
the most important thing is to get Caleb Williams going, and he was Caleb Williams' college coordinator.
I think you're drawing too much of a line to college there. I think Caleb Williams is a very annoying quarterback to be around.
Yeah, that's probably true.
To be around him for another 10 years feels like he may run in a different direction.
All right, so we've pretty much got New England covered already with Vrabel.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
What are the other openings? It's the Saints, it's the Raiders, probably the Cowboys are open. There's another
Yeah.
team, isn't there?
So back to the Jaguars real quick.
Oh, Jets too. Jets too.
I could see Aaron Glenn accepting the Jaguars job as well.
I think Aaron Glenn might be the Jets or the Saints head coach.
I don't think anyone wants to go to the Jets, and I think the Saints, after having Dennis Allen, wants to go offense. John Gruden. I haven't heard his name recently, but I joke.
Are you saying the Jets are the worst or the Saints are the worst? Which of those two? Or the Raiders?
I think the Jets have a lot less stability, so I think that head coaches would look at it as the worst job. I think they have more talent than the Saints, but I think the Saints ownership will be much more likely to stick with a guy for longer than they should.
So would we say that Dallas is likely to re-sign McCarthy?
100%. I think that happens this weekend.
Would we say the Raiders probably most likely ones to go after Pete Carroll?
Maybe he's in there. I think Salah's in there as well. You also have the Aaron Glenn factor of it all. I think last week Aaron Glenn really put himself on the map with how he handled the Vikings and Sam Darnold. Like, I just feel like that performance now puts him in the front of everyone's mind for this coaching cycle, which he's turned down the Patriots already. So we know he's probably not going there. So, but yeah. So as far as the Saints go, they could go like a John Gruden type, because that would work with Derek Carr. They have to go with something that works with Derek Carr, unless they're going to go in a different direction at quarterback altogether.
I think they'll go offense. I think it could be someone like a retread, like Gruden. I don't know who would want to work with the way they have the cap set up and how it limits their roster. I don't know who would want to work with that. I think more teams would be interested in the Raiders. More coaches would be interested in the Raiders at this point because they cleaned house altogether and they get to start over basically. So
they could steal Liam Cohn from the Buccaneers. So you got that.
Maybe
worked for the Panthers. So
I think they'll go Aaron Glenn.
Okay.
I think the Saints will go Aaron Glenn. I think the Jets will go Rex Ryan. I think the Raiders go Pete Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Cowboys go McCarthy.
So you're leaving Saleh out of this group?
Yeah, I think Saleh is just a DC at this point. Ben Johnson to Jacksonville.
If the Raiders do hire Pete Carroll, who's in his 70s, he has to come with a succession plan. 73 right now. He'll be 74 before the season starts. I wouldn't want my grandfather coaching NFL teams. He has to come with a succession plan or else.
Andy Reid is old.
He's
Sean
been there
Payton's
though,
old.
for 12. He's not being hired this year.
Honestly, Pete Carroll is like 10, 15 years younger than his actual age.
And
pretty
Sean
healthy.
Payton's only 61, so that's a decade and a half younger than
Nah,
Pete
dude,
Carroll.
Sean Payton's like 75. You're lying. You're lying to the public right now.
And Andy Reid's been trying to step away for a while, but his teams keep winning.
Yeah.
He's only 66, too. So he's a whole decade younger than Pete Carroll, too.
So you think no one signs Spagnuolo?
Yeah, I think he sticks around because I think he had actually a down year for the Chiefs this year overall.
I think Spagnuolo could be a dark horse hire for the Jaguars if Ben Johnson does go to Chicago.
Possibly. I mean, he's got three interviews scheduled right now with the Jags, Raiders, and Jets.
I just can't see him going to the Saints after the history there.
Can't see him going to the Raiders either, knowing that he has to play the Chiefs every year.
Oh, he can't go. The Chiefs declined the Raiders' attempt to interview him. The Chiefs won't let him go to the Raiders. They declined.
It was published last night that he has an interview today with them.
I saw they declined it. They wouldn't let him meet with them.
Oh, interesting. That was as of last night.
If I were the Chiefs, I would make him the succession plan to Reid.
He's older than Reid.
Really? Is he really? Spagnuolo is older than Reid?
He's 65, Reid's 66, so sorry.
No, I thought Reid was 70-something.
No, and Reid's been there since he's 50-something years old. That's what. So Pete Carroll would be hired 20 years later than Andy Reid was. I just don't think he has enough runway to like build a dynasty. So he would need a full succession plan, in my opinion. Age ain't nothing but a number, but yeah, Father Time is undefeated.
All right. Well, I mean, I think that pretty much shakes down all the coaches and destinations. So we will keep track of that and see who gets hired by next time we record.
Absolutely. Will anyone be hired? Because in-person interviews aren't allowed until later in the postseason this year. So will anyone be hired by the time that we record next time? Valid question.
Yeah, I don't know. But that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading and listening to this episode. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy and with our handle at N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
All right. Bye, everybody.